Welcome to this video tutorial for virtualracingschool.com with the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car on Iracing. This week we visit Road America to perform some analysis on a race fuel lap driven by Rens Broekman, running in default late afternoon weather. As usual, I'll play the lap through first in full before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 2-minute 07.956. So to start things off, as ever on the VRS website, from the list of data packs, I'm going to choose the Porsche Iracing Cup data pack as driven by Rens Broekman. Week 6 Road America loads up the session details where you can download the lap files, the replay and the setup. I'm going to click on Learn Track, which is going to load up the analyzer. And if you haven't seen this before, you have a bunch of telemetry traces. You've got a steering trace through the duration of the lap, a speed trace, brake and throttle traces, and some live inputs. So I'm going to take it to Sector 1 to start things off, which is the run from the start-finish line to the braking zone for Turn 1. So I'll just play this through. And obviously you want to keep the car over to the left hand side and think about your braking point for Turn 1. So that's going to be just before this first group of 4 cones. So we'll go to Sector 2 for that, and I'm going to slow it down to half speed as well. Now the trend in these corners is very similar throughout the lap in this particular car especially. There is a pattern of braking, sustaining threshold braking, so just before the point of lockup, which is about 60-70%, and then bleeding off as Ren starts to turn in, but then not letting go of the brakes and holding about 15-20% of brake pressure all the way into the apex, and then picking up the throttle at the apex, modulating it, waiting for the traction to come in, and then planting it to committing to full throttle for the exit. So just to go back through to the start, so you'll see a very similar pattern. There are fairly generic 90-degree corners throughout this circuit. There are a couple of variations, especially the carousel, the kink, turn 13, penultimate corner, and also the last corner. But most of the corners follow this pattern of driving. So start things off, obviously, yeah, braking just before the 4 cones there, braking quite hard, sustaining the brake pressure, keeping the car straight, down into 4th gear, and the point at which Rens is turning in, which is just after that first cone, if we just show you chase view as well, it's going to be just before this black curbing on the outside as well, which sort of lines up with this one marker. So there are several references scattered around this circuit, so you should be okay in terms of needing a reference. So we're in 4th gear. Again, Rens is trailing the brakes all the way into the apex, is up on that apex curb, and then as soon as he's apexed, he's hard on the throttle, or very quick to apply the throttle, and he's straight from 0 throttle to being at the point where the wheels, the tyres are on the edge of traction. And then from that point on, he hesitates slightly, waits for the car to settle, waits for the traction to come in more, and then as the corner opens up, he commits to full power before the exit of the corner, and also takes advantage of the extra curb on the exit there as well. The only thing you need to worry about is dropping a wheel onto the grass, so because the curb tends to end a little bit too early. Okay, so now into turn 3. For some reason there is a turn 2 in between turn 1 and 3, but I don't really know where it is. Anyway, this wall on the left, I guess that could be a reference for your braking point into turn 3. So you have that in your peripheral. I normally have a quick glance to my reference, and then I look back towards the apex again before I start braking. That's quite important, that you're looking as far ahead as possible. Even if you have a quick glance to your reference, that's okay. So again, braking quite hard, 50-60%, and turning in, again we got another reference here just before this wall ends, just before we get parallel to that. But again, Rens is holding the brakes, trailing them all the way into the apex, and is picking up the throttle very abruptly at the apex, straight to the point at which the tyres are at the limit of traction for best rotation. If you hesitate and you kind of are more gradual with your application of throttle, that will unload the front tyres and induce some understeer because you're not straight on the limit of traction. So 3rd gear for this corner as well, so a bit of modulation there, and waiting for the optimal time to really commit, which is just before the exit, and again using a little bit of curb on the exit there. So very, very similar in terms of technique to turn 1, just considerably slower, and the exit is more important in turn 3 as well, because you have this really, really long straight down towards turn 5, which is one of the slowest corners on the circuit. Now obviously you're thinking about your braking point at this time. Take a fairly direct route, the line of least resistance, I guess, towards the braking point. And in terms of a reference, the grass on the right hand side, where that ends in between the 4 and the 3 marker, you should be good to go to use that. Maybe slightly after that actually, or just before the 3 marker. So again, Rens is braking quite firmly, holding that pressure, sustaining that pressure just below the threshold of lockup. Obviously this car does not have ABS, and braking in a straight line to maximize that braking potential. Brings him to the outside curb on the entry, which is the point where he does turn in. So we've passed that final marker, and we're just about onto the curb on the right hand side, just before the tarmac goes dark. And I'll play that through. And again, same technique of bleeding off the brakes as he turns in, but then holding a little bit of brake pressure all the way into the apex, just to keep the car rotating, keep the front end loaded up. And then on the apex, picking up the throttle abruptly. We're in 2nd gear, so the car is quite traction limited at this speed. There's more torque available in this gear at the rear wheels, so you need to be more careful with how aggressive you are, or how much throttle you apply. So there's more of a modulation there on the exit, and a bit more patience from Rens as he exits, but he still reaches full throttle before the exit curb. And a note about the exit curb, which is very wide and very flat, you can take full advantage of that and open the car up, let the car do its thing, and use all of that on the exit. Up the hill now, braking into this left-hander just before the Corvette bridge. Now, the car is not that fast at this point, so you don't need to brake super hard, but you do need to start turning in pretty early, pretty much just as you go under the bridge. You need to start turning in, bleeding off, but then holding those brakes once again all the way into the apex. And the apex curb is quite wide and flat, so you can take advantage of that and get the car up on there. It's a little bit blind on entry, but as long as you're looking towards the apex, you should be okay when it does eventually become visible. And again, quite a slow corner. The circuit does kind of fall away slightly on the exit, which is why it's a bit more difficult to put the power down here. So there's a considerable period of hesitation where Rens is just patiently waiting with that amount of throttle on the edge of traction, waiting for the car to open up before then committing to full throttle, this time with the car on the exit curb by the time he's actually reached full throttle. And then obviously it's a case of just setting ourselves up for the fast right-hander of turn 7, which doesn't necessarily need a brake, but if you are going to do that, then you need to lift sooner than Rens has done here. So Rens has opted to brake. It helps for rotation if you do that. And there's not really much of a reference here. There is this wall on the left, but you need to start turning in and braking before then. Otherwise you're not going to make it around. And obviously you want to do your braking fairly early, straight away basically, and that should also allow you to get on the power really soon. So a little bit different to some of the other corners, very fast sweeping corner, and you should be able to get on the power very soon. Now there's hesitation in the throttle here, and that's because the car is exploiting this curb, which has the potential to upset the balance of the car, so that's why you need to be a little bit patient when you're on it. So after the car has left the curb and settled, and you know that you've got enough track on the exit to keep it on the black stuff, you can commit to full throttle towards now the short run to turn 8, which again you've got these markers on the right hand side which you can use for a reference. So this number 3 marker is going to be a good one. Braking hard, another 90-degree left-hander, and in terms of a turn-in point, down into 3rd gear, start bleeding off roughly halfway along this black curb on the entry, and then have another downshift just before you apex into 2nd gear, and again holding a bit of trailing brake all the way into the apex to help the car rotate, and then picking up the throttle just about at the apex or just before the apex, picking up the throttle, and again 2nd gear corner, so traction limited, so modulate, have some patience before you commit to full throttle, even though that initial application is quite abrupt to help the car rotate. Reaches full throttle now before the exit curb, opens the car up, but then brings the car quite early on over to the left again, well before the Speedville bridge. We go to sector 8 into what is a very unusual corner relative to the others on the circuit, the carousel, which is a constant radius, very, very long right-hander, more than 180 degrees in fact. So Rens is going to start turning in completely flat out, but then as he goes under the bridge he starts to bleed off the throttle, just feathers out of the throttle before then having a full lift just as he hits his he's kind of turned it into a double apex corner. So this is sort of our first apex, and then control the understeer with a little bit of braking just to keep the front end loaded up. If you've got understeer, don't overdo it because you don't want to bring the speed down too much. And then as the car just starts to tighten again, the point at which it just starts to tighten, that's when you want to get back on the power. And then after that, it's just a matter of playing with the throttle to set the car up for the perfect moment to commit. So that's going to be just before this second apex curb, sort of towards the exit of the corner, where Rens finally commits there after a small hesitation. And position wise, you want to make sure that you absolutely hit this red and yellow painted curb on the inside. That's critical, otherwise you'll understeer wide on the exit. Open the car up, use all of the track. We'll go to sector 9, which is into the kink. Just want to show you the reference actually, so we'll go back to sector 8. There is this 2 marker just here on the left. So very briefly after that is going to be the braking point. But the kink is such a fast corner that you don't really need to brake to slow the car down as much as you need to just get the car rotating. So Rens is braking very gently here, but then sustaining that brake pressure all the way into the apex to get the car to rotate. Otherwise he would probably understeer and miss the apex. So for the optimal rotation, hold those brakes on and then pick up the throttle hard. Very fast corner, the car's quite loaded up. We're also in quite a high gear at this point, 5th gear on entry and also through the corner itself. And you should be able to commit to full throttle at the apex if you do get your entry correct, and you also don't overshoot your entry with too much speed. For the exit, the car will run out onto this curb. Take full advantage of that, but try and avoid running out onto the grass, and then just keep the steering nice and quiet, keep the car nice and quiet. Take the line of least resistance, allow the car out wide again to give yourself a nice direct and straight line approach into the braking for Canada corner, another 90-degree corner. So we'll go to sector 10 for that. Again, there are some markers here on the left. We're going to be braking just before the 4 marker, and we're going to be sustaining that brake pressure down the gears into 3rd gear, and we're going to start to turn in just after that final marker, bleeding off the brakes, holding the brakes into the apex. Rens is off the brakes briefly there, possibly because the line that he's on is a little bit too tight and he doesn't want to tighten it further, which is what trail braking does. It tightens the line. It also has a tendency to create some oversteer if you do overdo it. So do it with caution, but all the way into the apex, and apexes nicely and picks up the throttle on the apex, hesitates, waits for the car to get planted and opens the car up, and then commits to full throttle. On the exit again, you've got another wide black curb. Just go back a tiny bit. A very flat curb, so take full advantage of that. Just be aware that it does end very suddenly, and bring the car over to the right hand side to set yourself up for the fast right-hander of turn 13, Bill Mitchell bend. So we'll go to sector 11 for that. So roughly halfway along the curve on the right, you want to start turning in. Doesn't really need a braking application so much as, again, similar to the fast right-hander of turn 7, just to help the car rotate if needed. So Rens is off the throttle as he turns in 4th gear, and he's just squeezing on the brake if the car needs it to help the car rotate. But again, is able to pick up the throttle really early, even if it means hesitating on the curb. So we're fully on the curb at this point, and Rens is hesitating as a result, waiting for the car to settle, and then once he feels like the car has enough track available, he commits to full throttle, lets it run out all the way onto the access road there on the right, before then bringing the car back over to the left hand side quite early on actually, to open the final corner up as much as possible. Now this is a little bit different to some of the other corners in that the braking zone is curved, so you're turning whilst braking, so as a result you can't afford to brake very hard, so only about 30% here, otherwise you'll probably lock up the inside front. So just be aware of that. In terms of a reference, we're braking just before the 3 marker, and even so we're still being taken or carried out towards the outside of the corner for the turn-in, which is where we want to be. So where this black curb is on the left hand side, you want to be right out there next to it to open up the entry as much as possible to give yourself the best possible chance of getting a good exit. But again, holding those brakes all the way into the apex and picking up the throttle quite abruptly, quite quickly, just before the apex, and having a very late apex on this curb to get the best possible exit, and really committing early on to full throttle there, opening the car up, taking advantage of this curb on the left in full just as it ends, avoiding the grass, and then opening the car up for the fastest run out towards the start-finish line. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracingschool.com, where you can also book one-on-one tuition with top drivers from the likes of Commander Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.